Uvanga Agnes Kuptana, ulukartormiutaw yung inuuqangamanni talva innaqortuami aglaat quyahuktunga upluput hulillagama inuugama ikayullagama kitkunnik quyanainnik. Inuvialuit is I'm proud to be Inuvialuit. I am proud to have my land claims with the Western Arctic region. For example, let me tell you. At one point, my husband, Robert Kuptana, was a negotiator for Kitamir Inuit Association, KIA. And one day we got a call to come to the meeting. The people want you to go to the meeting, public meeting. And I guess people from COPE was in. So we went up, and then they asked Robert if he would like to switch over to COPE and do negotiations for our Inuvialuit communities and for our people, so we can try and settle our land claims for our Inuit, for our elders, past elders, present elders, for our young adults, youth, and our children and our grandchildren and great-grandchildren for their future. He was kind of a bit shocked to hear all this, but then the people voiced out again in the meeting that they would like him to switch over. And that's how he started his negotiations, going back and forth to Ottawa. Sometimes he would be gone for a month and come home, and the plane is there. He comes into town, get a new set of new clean clothes, and he takes off again to another communities to do negotiations. I had to learn how to look after my children. They were at very young age, my oldest son, Irvin, and my daughter, Trudy Ann. And we had a couple of skidoos, which my brother-in-law, Wallace, maintained for us to make sure everything is okay. And we go hunting in the spring when it's nice and warm, like in March, April, May. And the caribou was nearby, and the geese starts to come in. And we go fishing, we get our fish, we get our caribou, and we get some geese if we're lucky. And that's how I had to learn to be a hunter and also a mother to my children while he's out.
As for myself, that I really had no education of any kind. And both my parents, they got sick with TB and were gone to Council Hospital in Edmonton. I was about maybe 7 or 8 months old. And I didn't know who my parents were. I only met them when I came back from, or when they came back from Council Hospital. I was about 7 years old. And I didn't know who they were. You know, I remember with the school kids that I play with when they take a break. I used to wonder, I wonder from where they get parents, you know, from mom and dad. So all this time my parents were taken away to Edmonton Council Hospital. But anyway, when they came back, I was old enough to go to school, but I decided that I'm going to be with my parents because I had no parents since I could remember. So I helped them out, and because both were crippled, had big operation. My father had 7 ribs taken off. My mom had 6 ribs taken off. And so they were in total disabled. So I learned how to be with them, and they teach me how to hunt by only talking to me, and I try to remember what they say. And I'll just tell one of them. I was about 9 years old by then. We were in Jesse Bay in Banks Island, Prince of Wales Strait. They talk about caribou, but they can't do nothing. So I was about 9 years old, and I had 22 rifle. That's so old that because my parents didn't have any money to buy anything, so they got me a single shot Kui. I remember that. That's all. I don't know if I read or somebody tell me about it. Then in July, I decided to go a few miles up and look around. We had no binoculars or any kind of a scope, but I see something moving. And so right there, as soon as I see it, it was caribou. So I decided to go to it, and remembering that that if I see, because I got only a small rifle, 22, so that I got to shoot it in the heart. And so I remember that you have to shoot it in just maybe just behind the arms, front legs. So they say that's where the heart is. So my old rifle, I shoot really close, maybe about 50 yards away. That's how I crawl to it. So that caribou just feed along. So I try and shoot, nothing happened, so I changed the bullet again. So old. When I changed the bullet, this time it shoot. And when it shoot, next thing I heard, I see that caribou jump up in the air, front legs, and then gallop, in full gallop. And I didn't know how to speak English, so I said, Momiana! You know, see, too bad. And then, right there, trying to put bullet on and gonna try to shoot again. But this time, I was watching that caribou in full gallop. Next thing, his front legs come up like that. When they came up like that, and then fall down. Yeah, fall down. I was wondering, I wonder how did it die? I know I shoot it, but there's only one shot, and it's 22 rifle. my parents had tell me to shoot the caribou in the heart, but we're just lucky, you know, it's only 50 yards away, but really close, could see the ice and all that. And then right there when I go to it, I can't skin it because I was too young. I got some kind of a pocket knife and pack sack. And then I didn't know how to skin it, so I said, oh, maybe I should go get my dad and maybe somebody else. So I went and then go get them, and then they skin it. I was only about maybe a couple of miles, 2-3 miles out from our camp. And then it was the first fat caribou we eat. So we got caribou, and Dad put on maybe about 4 or 5 pack dogs. You can pack, and then brought it home, and Mom cleaned up the hide and dry it, and then we ate feast there. So that was my first experience of caribou. So those kind of things that, you know, we remember when we were kids, and we treasure them. But anyway, that in terms of negotiating our land claim, and we had a lot of field workers in all of the 6 Inuvialuit communities. We gathered up information there, and there were 3 things that stand out the most that they wanted, and plus other things. One is that our cultural way of life and language and our skills, our way of life, that it had been passed on since nobody knows. Then other one too, that is hunting to protect our wildlife and biological productivity of our animals and fish. And also to that, you know, we always say that, you know, we own this land, we were born in this land here, and we don't know anywhere else. And we say that we own this land. And then we decided that, you know, we want to entrench our hunting rights, because we had every right before any Europeans came into the Arctic, to Canada, North America. Then when we negotiated for those reasons, you know, we put out very specific rights where we have negotiated. First one was the preferential right in all of the Inuvialuit settlement region. Second one was exclusive hunting rights on Inuvialuit lands, and also like almost anything that went in our region. Then also to have exclusive rights on polar bears, and then the other one was also to have exclusive rights to fur bears and grizzly and black bears, and preferential rights in different places. So, keeping that in mind, what we say, because we have these exclusive rights, which means we will take the control of any hunting rights that we have, and we want to be able to entrench our way of life, our culture, our freedom, the way that our ancestors have lived one time, even though our society has changed. And yet, we wanted to keep passing on those rights and a way of life. And if we don't, then our future generations will say, how come you never negotiate to protect our way of life, hunting, and land ownership? We don't know anywhere else. It's something that we need to know. Then, in the final agreement itself, as we go on, we negotiate corporations such as IRC and IDC and other corporations. And then we need money to run them so that we can be able to mingle with the Inuit society in North America, such as Canada, U.S., and anywhere else that the society is similar situation. And at the same time, we have to look at the economy itself. And for the economic measures itself, that where we have negotiated with the free trade negotiators, and that we say that because we have these here, and we also have oil and gas, we have minerals, and all these things that we own these areas and lands. So we negotiate in terms of exclusivity. And then in some parts of the land, such as 7-1A lands. And then also that the surface rights to the lands were in 7-1B lands. And all this here, we negotiated because we have land use and occupancy study that we have studied over the years how our people have been living. And these kind of things that we need to apply them to the changing society of our world, because you have brought in this education system which is foreign to us, and we need to apply what we negotiate with you, all these things. And then we need to have that ability to legislate it in terms of our control. So we have negotiated the constitution of the land claim itself. So we use the Section 35 and the Act of 1982 so that we can be able to use the exclusivity of what we want to do in our lands. So that way that we can be able to negotiate it and to be included and inducted into the Canadian Constitution. And they argued that it cannot be done. Now, in 1763, King George III put out a proclamation, such as royal proclamation, that no one in North America can be able to make any movement or hurt or alter the way of life of the Aboriginal people of that land, which is North America, which is include America and Canada and the Arctic. Now, that the proclamation is so powerful in those days that it even included as far south of Florida. And it all applied to America. It applied to Canada. And that exclusivity has the ability to act and be able to use it in terms of country's constitution, which means that the act that we use of 1982 has the same ability and power as the Canadian Constitution of 1867, right from that moment on, because all that had been instituted by the King of England. And so that's why we have a country today of Canada, and that Canada itself has the ability to enact the powers of the country. And then we talk about our land ownership, where we have negotiated 35,000 square miles of land. and parts of it, such as 71A land, where we own exclusively to the minerals, oil and gas, and also have the control, which means that if any companies or any institution that wanted to come to our area, that we can show him the Act of 1982, which was negotiated right until 1984 of June 5. And those things that are so true today, that we can be able to come to the point of control in terms of talking about is our hunting rights, where we negotiated the exclusive and preferential rights, which means that we have organizations such as Hunters and Trappers, Inuvialuit Game Council, and they deal with our rights of the freedoms that our ancestors have lived with one time. And then, in that moment on, our authority applies by the power of the Constitution of Canada. And so, which means if any development or anything else that might occur in our area, we have the right and the back of our country to be instituted so that we can be able to control what's in our area, which makes it to a very close point of how it was before any Europeans came, even before Canada was a country. And so those kind of things that we have negotiated in our lands. And then we think about big development taking place in Beaufort Sea or out on the land, such as private lands, 71A, 71B. If there's any unusual accident happen, our land become no more animals. The final agreement itself has the power to move any one of Inuvialuit communities wherever that the Inuvialuit want to live. So those kind of abilities that our final agreement has, and that's the reason why the ability of the final agreement need to be taught in schools and also in special programs, or maybe out on the land themselves, where the government nowadays has put us in a hamlet. We're not allowed to go anywhere by the affirming again of the Canadian government because of the society itself, where all the education has to be taken place by our children as Canadians. But we need to include more on it so that our people don't forget what they are, who they are, what they got, and the techniques of our people that were around when they were nomadic people. From that on, the Inuvialuit themselves, they need to be more active to bring our people, such as elders or the children or the students are having school. And that's not the end of the point, because the freedom that the government give us today, it's education. The freedom of that we have, the government themselves, they pay for it. And that's the same attitude has to be taken when we want to teach our children in such as programs going out on the land for maybe a couple of weeks out of at a time. And every Inuvialuit community has that right today. And it's also just need to be implemented from the final agreement itself. So every one of us, we need to remember what our ancestors went through, and that they would never permit us to go astray from our cultural way of life in terms adopting to a foreign society. So that's the reason why we need the protection of our Canadian government, because it's in their constitution to do that. So we just need to ask and do it more from our own way of life in our communities, out on the land, the freedom of speech, freedom of peace, freedom of our food, freedom of our nomadic way of life, the techniques that they have taught us. Because if you learn more about the Inuvialuit way of life, you will see a lot of that. It is it's unwritten scientific information, because even some of the scientists have not learned what the Inuvialuit knew about information out there on the land. And you know that they learn so much, in the fall time when they hunt caribou. Once it started to get a little bit dark at night, they say that the caribous, they go on the side of the hills where the sun is beating the plants, such as owhkowiak. And that's what the caribous eat when it's at its bloom time. And then it has an effect in caribous, one that we don't know it, the taste don't change, it still tastes good. And then, but there are effects in it. One, it's about the weather. The weather itself, that long time ago they said it was really cold, long before global warming. And then a lot of the times people, Inuit, see their breath in the sky, or even just on the air like this, that say it's so cold that they see their breath. When that happens, when they study the caribou itself, they look for one thing, the pancreas, which is near the liver. And then when they open it up and see it, and they say, oh, we're going to see our breath this year, which means the way they know it, the splint itself, the muffa, it's narrow. When the caribou splint, or the muffa in Inuvialuit, is white, you're not going to see your breath. It's going to be a mild winter. We're going to have a lot of snow for our igloos. And at that time, the muffa itself is white, because they say that something happened far away somewhere. And the scientists know it as the universe, and at certain years that the which we cannot see or hear or smell or anything like that, it come to us, finally reach us in the Arctic. So those kind of things that our people knew, because they can be able to predict anywhere from 4 to 5 months in advance how our weather will be for the winter. Juana. The IFA itself, it's a one-time deal with the Canadian government. We're not going to be able to negotiate another land claim again. And probably this Inuvialuit Final Agreement is the best in the world. It deals with our culture, our way of life, our hunting rights, our land ownership, where we have occupied the land itself, occupied the ocean, and where we have our ancestors have discovered in terms of science, but we don't say science, but we say came from somewhere long ways, and we didn't know anything about science that was taking place, and yet it's only spoken by the Inuvialuit themselves. And that's the reason why some of the areas that where they have set, I cannot say them in English because we had no English word for them, and yet they have the ability of discovering scientific information. So, that is the latest thing. And that's the reason why I would like to see our young people who are having school or maybe have dropped out or maybe are just living as adults, and maybe they might be any workers in our communities, maybe heavy equipment, office managers, anything. And yet at the same time, the nomadic way of life, it is forgotten in our communities. We have to go out into the wilderness, to environment, to the animals, to the fish, where our ancestors were so healthy because they eat omega-3, which is very rare in the world. There's lots of it out there, and if we have it, we don't need very much medications for us to keep on going what we have. That's the reason why it's very important for our people to know what's in the final agreement itself, because it's made from everything that our Inuvialuit people had before any European people came along with their society. And then when their society is applied to us, they don't want us to remember what we had in those days. It is very powerful. And for you young people and people that have known nomadic way of life, you can be able to teach them. You have that knowledge, that traditional knowledge itself. It has derived from scientific information from our own people, because our own people, they know it. So that's the reason why I would say the final agreement on our cultural way of life should take on a second education system without any foreign policies, but with the policies and law that the Inuvialuit make themselves by following what's in our own way of life to survive. And that's the way we will survive that knowledge of education, and also to be ready for anything if things should change out there on the land. And the land itself, wildlife, and your skills, your knowledge will help you to survive and thrive on it. That's how our ancestors did it for thousands of years. Hoana. In 1971, President Richard Nixon, he signed a land claim for all of Alaska. And so that's when the start of the land claim itself began. And that's when I got to know Nellie Cournoyea very well from that moment on. The idea was that when we first started hearing about land claim, and we always have the concept and said that, we own this land. And then later on, we began to think about, I think we should be able to implement our land rights and hunting rights and everything that we have before any European came to the Arctic themselves, so that, we can have that freedom of hunting. So that's the reason why we have negotiated the exclusive hunting rights to certain animals, and also to all of the Inuvialuit settlement region, and as well as first take-up right when the Inuit Convention had taken place, and we finally started to open up our eyes when Nellie Cournoyea was involved in terms of the land claim itself. And even though we don't know ourselves, because the land claim itself, we know that it has to be protected from any source of danger that, it might diminish our way of life, our food, and our culture, and our economy, and everything. I think in 3 words I would say she was intelligent, she knew what she was doing, and she was strong. I first met her when we first started doing some work on land claim, and when Eben Hobson of Point Barrow, Alaska, called for Inuit Convention, International Inuit Convention in Point Barrow, and to talk about our rights, and as well too that the rights themselves, that we can be able to implement them in our way of life in terms of land claim itself. And in those days, I really didn't know anything about land claims, because there was nothing to fall back on, completely nothing anywhere. When I was raised around the Klavik myself, I knew her parents as well, Maggie and her dad and her family, like Herschel and them, her brother. And they lived in a delta just like anyone else. And yet, they lived just the same way as culture as the Inuvialuit themselves. Even her dad, even though he was a European. And yet, that's the reason why that Nellie Cournoyea is so powerful, because she was raised out on the land, and that was her home.
For one, she's part Inuvialuit, part ṱuᙵnaᕐniᖅ, and she's a very a smart lady that looks at everybody like one person, like she worked with everyone as one. And she's always talking to people, giving them, have a listening ear to them, see how things are going. If things are not going right, then she's on one-on-one. And she's a very strong lady for one, I know. Yeah. She sits with people, either elders, or young adults, or young elders, or, youth. She was always with somebody. Yeah. I know for one, when she was a chairperson for the Inuvialuit Regional Corporation, she had did very, very well and strong for our Inuvialuit people. Number one was where she makes sure that each community corporations have handouts to people, to the ladies that are insured in means of fur, such as sealskins, muskrats, you name it, all kinds of fur that the ladies can work with. She made sure that, they were not expensive and good fur. And when she sent them to the communities, she put them at a good rate where the ladies or the elders can afford them to make, things for sale. That's how she helps the communities, not only within Ulu, but within other communities as well in ISR.
When Cope started land claim itself, even before then, she was really totally involved. She quit CBC and then she started going around to the people and asked the people, what do you want with the land claim itself, Do you want land claim? Is it any good? And then people wanted three things. And one is our culture, our language, our nomadic way of life. It should be protected. And then on our hunting rights and protect the land and the ocean itself. And that's where the oil companies come in, because if anything should happen with any of the oil companies, the 6 communities of our region would be sitting ducks for nothing, without any benefits, completely nothing, because there was nothing that government have to give us anything until somebody, and one of us had mentioned that, we have the protection of England, King George III, when he set out the royal proclamation in 1763 that anything that you will be doing with the native people of North America, nothing will be in authority without his consent, unless he agree to it. The IFA itself, our land claim itself, is very important to us. And in those days, the Canmar and companies were drilling out in the Beaufort Sea, which is the most sensitive to our people, because if anything should happen and there's an oil spill, then probably if 1 or 2 species of animals that we have, and because the growth rate of the Arctic itself is so different from the rest of the world, it would be completely no more. And that would have taken our culture, our food, our way of life, and our language, because, we will have no reason to live around here.
First time I ever see her, I've gone to few trips with Robert to Ottawa, and she never wore a dress, never, not even shorts. But during the land claims signing, she wore a white dress, almost like a white dress, kind of a light color, like a beige type. And that was the first time we ever see her wearing a dress. And she was just jumping up and down like she was just so happy that we finally reached our land claim and settled. And, that's Nellie. Yeah. That's our Nellie. Yeah.
Everybody in our region cannot go without the land claim itself, because now they understand that, it's a protection of our wildlife, it's a protection of our culture, it's a protection of our language, and which it has been, a lot of it been implemented to the places where an exclusivity can be able to take place, where that the freedom of language can be able to flow through our communities. And nowadays, with when the territorial government has set up the hamlets themselves, language has changed from nomadic cultural way of words of our saying into the language of a hamlet, and a lot of the words we had to invent them because things has changed in terms of our language itself and culture.
Every tour that the Inuvialuit, the board, on through to each community in the spring, we still continue to push for, what Nellie used to do, to continue what, especially with the crafts and sewing, to keep it up. And another one is the language, keep the language strong, and the drum dancing out on the land programs, because that's all in the language. Teach the young people, the youth, and the stories, and learn the language from the elders, to keep that going. And hunting for the community, from our young people, even in the high schools. Yeah, put programs out. There is funding, and use up those fundings however we can to help. That you don't only look forward to getting paid or anything like that. What comes is, for me, when you teach the language and do programs with the youth or the young adults, is, to see them achieve with what they have come to do. They have learned, and proud of them. And when we used to work with youth and young people out on the land programs, just close by, we have a cabin just across the river. Take them there. Springtime seal hunting, they prepare the seals, dry them, cook, and smoke the meat, dry them, and put them away. And when we do geese, same thing. They pluck them, they shoot them, they pluck them, they make dry meat out of them, smoke the meat, and cut up the young seals, and cut up the rest of the geese in pieces. And when we come, and the fish too, when we go do fishing, jiggling in the spring, they cut up all their own fish, they make dry fish, leave some of them, and put them in freezer, clean them, and when we come back into town, we make a big feast for the community, and they each evening we would have a program to say, they write down what was your day like, what did you learn, what you like the best in our cultural ways of as Inuvialuit and young people going out on the land to learn. And they each would come up with their written stories, and then they have a translator. And the community would understand, how much they have learned, what they have achieved to do, and how they fed the elders in the community. Yeah. And we're hoping that another funding will come through so we can take elders, adults, youth out on another program again. Mm-hmm. I think it will succeed. Yeah.
I hear it's 50th anniversary of Kingalit.
We're looking forward to it. We're part of the committee, and we're really looking forward to it. It's going to be big and exciting. We have visitors coming in. And it's not like charters long ago when planes were so cheap to charter, and like gas and fuel. We used to get charters in from all over. But it's so different now. Yeah.
You remember the first jamboree?
The first jamboree, it was not jamboree, it was called Sports Day. We used to wonder, we were in Mashuyak, hunting young seals in the spring and waiting for the geese to come. And that time there was just very few geese, a little bit, were just starting to come. But the eider ducks were the ones that we wait for. And a DC3 would come, and then everybody from there would take 7 dogs, 9 dogs, and then all come to Ulu to go see what's happening. The runway was right here. We're right on the runway. Used to come, and everybody would go to that plane when it lands. And there used to be a lot of tourists that come, and one of the person that, organized the charter was Shorty Brown. And he used to bring a lot of watermelon, ice cream, fruits, and people would make kikuks, meaning they put rocks together and they make fire. And they cook ducks, seal, make bannock, fresh bannock, make fresh tea, smoke tea, and they play prisoner base and a little bit of games, and it was called Sports Day. And those tourists that come, they were fed and they liked it. Then they ask you questions. What am I eating? What is this? They try a piece. The most they loved is the soup, the broth that the elders have, and the fresh bannock to go with it, and smoked tea. And they would come back again the next year and the next year till we finally decide to do something about it. There was Robert and I organizing what we can do, what can we add, what can we name it. You know, it's been a sports day for so long, and it's a time on a Father's Day weekend when our eider ducks are coming back. And so we said, you know, why not name it Kingalig Jamboree? And that's how it began. And it got really huge. We got charters in from all over. All our 6 Inuvialuit communities, and part of Qitangiut was Cambridge Bay, Joe Haven, Coorayuk, Ṭellariaq, Qorlortoq, Yellowknife, Edmonton. We used to get Edmonton Oilers or Edmonton, the ones that play football, used to come.
Nice.
Or sometimes we would, if we raise enough money, then we would hire a band. Inuit band from Qitangiut area, or Inuvialuit band, or a band from Yellowknife or Edmonton, if we can afford it. Those days, the rate was so cheap for pass, and they give us, the airlines gives us discounts. So that used to be good old days, fun days. And we're looking forward to this 50th anniversary, because we know who we will be coming in. We're just so excited. Yeah. Tema?
Kona.
Nellie Cournoyea imma. ̓uyanainnaq paaluk. Inuk. Havallayoq. Akkut. Immaanut qayuittoq. Inungnut. Ikayorniarruni. Immaatut Inuviklu. Aqlarviklu. Paulatorlu. Tuktuiartorlu, Ikahuglu, Ulukkartorlu, Atauttimut ilittukit, Ima Inuit, Inuvialuitlu, Inuinnaujugut, Ulukkartormiutaugapta, Akhoorhuni havaktoq, Inuit atauhertut havautinnahoarrugit, Nunataarutikhaannik, Quyalillitikhaannik, Qanortut huerupta, Ilavullu huerpata, maamuvut, paapavut, uvagun avaleerupta, nutaqqavullu avaleerumik imaa. Nunataarnium iluani hunakkaqarianginnik, quyallitikhaannik. Ublumi havaangagut, ikkivayiqpait, IRC kutseungit, aallanguraluartillugit, nunataarnipta ataagun, Niqikkartorpaktugut hunanik tuyortarrerruta tuktuniglu iqalungniglu hunanikliqaangmamartuning. Immalo May 1st talvattauq angiuarpaup tuglianik nunataarniarmiyugut kiinaujarmik Inuvialuit 18 and over tamatkerlutik upingaggariaq talvaquyallitigikput Nellie Cournoyea ima havautingmatigut ilihautjiblunilo kingumut kitkun IRC ikkivautaanni chairman ngorniarmangaata tamakkuan iliyaungmata ima ikkivaqatigiblugit oqautiblugit qanortut huna kinguvaptingni hivuniptingnilu ittukkaq akkoraaluk Inuvialuutivun nakuyukkut nunataarianginni nunataarrimalutik quyallitikkhait kiinauyat all the benefits that we do get. We are so very thankful. Telba.
Yeah, I think Nellie Cournoyea herself, she is 1 in a million. A person that is so intelligent, and once she's learned it, she doesn't forget it. And she'll tell you about it. And you got to correct yourself if you are talking to her. So, yeah, how many times I did that myself? I have to correct myself so that I could be a better negotiator. Yeah, so those kind of things that, because he knew lots about Inuvialuit culture themselves, and also some of the language as well too. And she can be able to understand if you are speaking to her in Inuvialuit. And then she knew that also what the Inuvialuit wanted, those areas that we have to get, and until they are comfortable, you're not going to go home until you get them. So that's the reason why, some of our many trips we go to Ottawa, even though we really want to do fishing and hunting and like for caribou and geese and ducks and everything that was our way of life. So we think about that, and if we don't get it, our people not going to have it. They're going to be, they're going to be the losers. So we had to prove in our way of walking and talking and in our way of doing things. That's the reason why we have proof to the government in terms of principles that we want. And that's what we got in our final agreement itself. And it proved on those areas that where Nellie pushes hard to get that. And I think, she was not only a boss, but she was also a great negotiator. Yeah.